The night skies of Earth were calm, filled with stars that had shone the same way for thousands of years. Cities glowed with lights, oceans moved with quiet waves, and people believed the world was safe. For more than 100 years, humanity had lived in peace. The old wars were only memories in books and museums. No one wanted to fight anymore. Children grew up never hearing the sound of bombs. Soldiers were few and armies were small. People said war would never return. But far away at the edge of human space, whispers had begun. Traders and explorers spoke of colonies that stopped sending messages. Outposts went dark. Ships that traveled too far did not come back. Rumors spread in markets and spaceports. Some said raiders were responsible. Others said storms in deep space destroyed the colonies. But a few spoke in quiet fear of something else. Ships not human, weapons not made by human hands. Their stories were laughed at. Earth was too proud to believe. After all, who would dare to challenge mankind? Humanity had built great cities, traveled to the stars, and spread to dozens of colonies. To think of aliens bringing destruction was treated like a joke told in a bar. Leaders on Earth met in quiet rooms. They argued for days. Some believed danger was close. Others said the people must not be frightened with tales of aliens. At last, they made their choice. Earth would not prepare for war. They said peace was stronger, and if enemies existed, they would never come so close to the home world. The leaders told the people not to worry, and so life went on. In the skies above, old defense stations circled the planet. Most of them were empty. Weapons sat unused, covered in dust, their systems running on the lowest power. Satellites that once watched for enemies were now used for weather reports. Earth's navies had shrunk to a shadow of their former strength. There were only a few warships left, docked in silence, waiting for orders that never came. Still, not everyone was blind. Some scientists warned of strange readings from deep space. They spoke of massive objects moving together, far beyond the outer colonies. Their reports were sent to the government but ignored. Others, young officers in the fleet, begged their commanders to bring the old ships back to readiness. They were told to be quiet. Earth did not want war. Earth had refused the very thought of it. Then came the night when the sky burned. It started with silence. High above the atmosphere, early warning satellites watched the stars. For years, they had seen nothing unusual. But now their sensors screamed. Dozens of massive shapes had entered the system, moving with speed and power no human ship could match. They did not send greetings. They did not open talks. Their weapons lit the void. The first salvo struck without warning. Bolts of energy crossed the distance of space and hit Earth's defense stations. One by one, the old stations burst apart like fireworks. Their fragments fell into the atmosphere, turning into glowing trails that streaked across the night sky. In cities below, people looked up thinking they were watching shooting stars. For a brief moment, crowds cheered, pointing to the skies, but the cheers turned to screams as explosions followed. Pieces of burning metal rained down, crushing buildings and setting fires. In orbit, more satellites were destroyed. A ring of fire formed around Earth, glowing like a crown of death. Civilian space stations went dark as power failed. Millions of people watched from windows, unable to believe what they were seeing. Some recorded it on their phones, not knowing they were capturing the first moments of humanity's greatest war. Governments were thrown into chaos. Emergency broadcasts filled the air. People were told to stay inside, to find safety, though no one knew where safety could be found. The ground shook as debris slammed into the oceans. Tidal waves rose, swallowing coastlines. Panic spread through every city, and above them the enemy fleet moved closer. For the first time in centuries, Earth faced true terror. No one knew who these attackers were or why they had come. No one could understand their weapons or their language. They had not asked for surrender, and they had not asked for peace. They had only sent fire. On one hill outside the capital, a young boy watched with wide eyes as the night sky glowed red. He had never seen war, never heard of battles except in his school lessons. Now he saw the heavens themselves burning. His parents pulled him inside, but he could not forget the sight. Across the world, millions of others felt the same fear. And far out in orbit, deep inside an old military dock, a forgotten warship stirred. It had not flown in decades. Its systems were weak, its armor scarred from testing long ago. But as alarms filled the dock, its lights began to glow. Power flowed through its engines again. Its name was painted in bold letters along its hull. Humanity had left it to sleep, but now it would rise. The war that Earth refused had finally come. And the first enemy salvo had lit the skies with fire. The night after the first attack was not a night at all. The sky above Earth glowed with falling fire. What had once been stars now looked like burning trails as wreckage from shattered stations rained down. In every city, alarms screamed. Families rushed into shelters. Soldiers scrambled through bases that had been quiet for generations. The world that had lived in peace for 100 years was now filled with terror. The first salvo had destroyed Earth's outer defenses. But the enemy did not stop. Their fleet pushed closer, dark shapes moving like shadows across the void. No signal came from them. No words, only weapons. Their next strike was aimed not at orbiting stations but at the heart of Earth itself. Bolts of strange light tore through the atmosphere. They struck oceans and mountains, blasting craters larger than cities. Entire coastlines disappeared in waves. Ships at sea were tossed into the sky before crashing down in pieces. In space, Earth's communication satellites blinked out one by one, leaving the planet blind. People who had been talking to loved ones across the globe heard only silence. Governments sent desperate calls to the fleets that still existed. But there were not many. Earth had only a handful of warships left, most too old, too weak, or too slow to fight. In hidden hangars, engineers rushed to bring them online, fingers shaking as they worked. In the great orbital docks above the planet, one ship stirred more strongly than the rest. Its engines hummed with power for the first time in decades. This was the ESS Dauntless, the last battleship designed before Earth chose peace over war. Inside its steel hull, Captain Elias Reyes stood on the command bridge. He was a man who had trained all his life but never fired a weapon in real combat. Like many officers of his generation, he had been raised in a world where war was history. Yet now, as the screens before him filled with warnings, his face was set in stone. The Dauntless was not ready, but it was all Earth had. "Bring the reactors to full power," Reyes ordered. His voice was calm, but his crew could hear the weight in it. All around the ship, engineers, gunners, and pilots took their stations. Dust was brushed from controls that had not been touched in years. Systems long silent came alive with glowing lights. In the launch bay, pilots ran toward fighters, climbing into cockpits. None of them had fought an alien before, but their eyes were sharp. Humanity had been caught unprepared, yet in their hearts they were not willing to fall without a fight. Down on the surface, chaos spread. Streets were filled with fleeing crowds. Bunkers overflowed with families clutching children. Hospitals trembled as quakes shook their walls. In one city by the sea, fire rained from the sky, shattering towers like glass. A single girl stood on a balcony, frozen as she watched buildings collapse. Her father pulled her away just before the balcony fell. These moments played out across the globe. Ordinary people forced into terror they could not understand. Above it all, the enemy fleet hovered. Their ships were vast and strange, their shapes twisting against starlight. They moved like predators circling prey. Each time their weapons fired, another piece of Earth died. Still, they sent no message, no demand. The silence was worse than words. Humanity was left to wonder, was this extermination? The Dauntless launched. Engines roared, shaking the dock as the massive battleship rose into the dark. Its hull, scarred but strong, glimmered in the glow of Earth's burning sky. Civilians watching from the ground cheered faintly as they saw it climb. For them, this single ship was a symbol, a reminder that humanity had not surrendered yet. As the ship cleared the atmosphere, its sensors locked onto the nearest alien cruiser. The enemy ship was sleek, its hull black like a blade cutting through the stars. It fired without hesitation, a lance of energy screaming toward the Dauntless. For a moment, the crew thought they would die before the battle even began, but the Dauntless's shields flared to life, struggling but holding. "Return fire," Reyes shouted. The ship's railguns thundered, hurling metal slugs across the void. Bright streaks tore through space, smashing into the alien cruiser. The first shots glanced off, leaving little damage. But then, one round struck deep, ripping through an exposed section of the alien hull. Sparks and fire burst out. The alien ship shuddered, its formation breaking for the first time. Cheers erupted across the Dauntless. Humanity had landed its first true strike. Across Earth, news channels that still survived broadcast the moment. People in bunkers screamed with joy. For the first time since the attack began, hope flickered, but hope was short-lived. Behind the damaged cruiser, more enemy ships appeared. Larger, stronger, and armed with weapons unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Their shadows stretched across the stars, countless in number. The small victory felt like a spark against a storm. On the Dauntless, the crew fell silent as their screens filled with readings of the new enemy force. Captain Reyes stood firm. "We may not survive this battle," he said, his voice steady. "But we will fight. If humanity must fall, let it be with fire in our hands." The enemy fleet began to advance, weapons charging, their glow like suns being born in the darkness. Earth's fate now rested on a handful of old ships and one untested battleship standing against an armada. And as the alien reinforcements poured into the system, humanity realized the first battle had only just begun. The Dauntless moved through the dark like a steel giant, her engines burning bright against the emptiness of space. All around her, the wreckage of shattered satellites and broken defense stations drifted, glowing with fire. Behind her, Earth still burned, its skies flashing with the remains of the first salvo. And ahead loomed the enemy fleet. There were dozens of them. Sleek black cruisers, their hulls smooth and silent, arranged in tight formation. Their weapons pulsed with a cold light, each glow brighter than a city. They advanced slowly like hunters closing in on their prey. Their silence was worse than any threat. No message came. No warning. They simply pushed forward, as if the destruction of Earth was nothing more than a task to be finished. On the bridge of the Dauntless, every crew member felt the weight of that silence. The air was tense. Young officers kept their eyes fixed on screens that shook with warning signals. Some of them had never left Earth's orbit until this day. Now their first duty was to face an enemy no human had ever fought before. "Lock targets," Captain Reyes ordered, his voice steady. He stood at the center of the bridge, tall and calm. Though inside he knew the truth, they were badly outnumbered. The Dauntless's railguns turned, their barrels glowing as power surged into them. Missiles armed in their bays, ready to fire. Shields flickered to full strength, humming like a heartbeat. Across the fleet, Earth's smaller ships joined in. The old destroyers, frigates, and carriers that had been silent for decades. Rust showed on their hulls, but their crews stood ready. For the first time in 100 years, Earth's navy gathered to fight. The first clash began with a single shot. One of the alien cruisers fired a beam of light so sharp it cut through space itself. A human frigate tried to dodge, but the beam carved it in half. The ship split into two glowing pieces. Its crew lost in seconds. Gasps filled the Dauntless's bridge, but no one had time to grieve. "Fire," Reyes commanded. The Dauntless unleashed her fury. Railgun slugs ripped through the void, each one moving at incredible speed. They slammed into the enemy line. Explosions sparked across one cruiser's hull, tearing open its side. Human missiles followed, streaking like burning arrows. They found their target, detonating against another alien ship and sending fire across its frame. For a heartbeat, the tide seemed to turn. Humans had struck back with force. On Earth below, people watching hidden broadcasts cheered. Children in bunkers clapped. Soldiers on the ground shouted in triumph. Humanity, for the first time, had landed real blows against the invaders. But then the enemy answered. More beams lit the sky, carving through human ships like knives through paper. One destroyer exploded in a ball of fire, its escape pods scattered like sparks. Another ship lost its engines and spun helplessly, drifting into the path of enemy fire until it was torn apart. The fleet was being ripped apart ship by ship. On the Dauntless, alarms rang as shields flickered. The bridge shook as enemy fire hammered against their hull. Metal groaned under the pressure. Officers struggled to hold their positions. "Forward batteries, fire again," Reyes barked. The Dauntless's cannons roared, sending a fresh storm of projectiles into the enemy line. This time the shots tore straight through the center of a cruiser. The alien ship cracked open, its strange energy core bursting with blinding light. A cheer erupted on the bridge. Humanity had destroyed its first alien warship, but even as the wreck drifted into the darkness, more alien ships closed in. They were not slowing. They were not afraid. Their formation shifted like blades crossing in a duel. It was clear. They intended to crush Earth's fleet completely. Still, the Dauntless refused to back down. The battleship turned hard, diving into the thick of the fight. Her broadside railguns opened up, unleashing a storm of fire that lit the void. Enemy ships staggered under the barrage. Fighters launched from her hangars, small craft racing forward to clash with alien drones. Dogfights lit up space, human pilots screaming through comms as they fired every missile they had. On Earth, billions of eyes watched the battle unfold on shaky transmissions. Each victory of the Dauntless brought hope. Each loss of a human ship broke hearts. It was not only a battle in space, it was a battle for the soul of humanity itself. Then, without warning, the enemy reinforcements arrived. Sensors screamed as a new wave of alien ships warped into the system. They were larger, faster, and more heavily armed. At the center of them was a colossal vessel, a command ship the size of a mountain. Its hull glowed with lines of strange light, patterns that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The Dauntless's crew fell silent as the readings came in. This was no simple fleet. This was an armada. On the bridge, Captain Reyes tightened his grip on the railing. "So," he whispered almost to himself, "the real battle begins now." The crew stared out at the endless wall of enemy ships that filled their screens. Earth's surviving fleet was broken and scattered. Many ships were gone. The Dauntless stood almost alone in the middle of the storm, and yet even in that moment of despair there was no thought of retreat. Humanity had been struck, bloodied, and nearly broken. But it was still standing. The clash had only begun. And though the enemy had the numbers, Earth had something else. Hearts willing to fight until the last spark of light. The Dauntless turned her guns once more toward the vast enemy fleet, ready to face the impossible. The first clash was not over. It was only the beginning of humanity's war. The battle in orbit raged on, but Earth's fleet was breaking apart. Human ships drifted as wreckage, their fires glowing like dying candles in the black. The Dauntless fought with everything she had, railguns hammering, missiles flying, shields straining. Yet the truth was clear. One ship could not hold forever against an armada. Captain Reyes knew it. His crew knew it. And somewhere, deep inside the halls of Earth's command, the leaders knew it too. Far below the burning skies, inside an underground war bunker buried beneath the capital, a desperate meeting was underway. Screens flickered with images of the Dauntless still fighting, one battleship against a sea of predators. Generals argued. Politicians shouted. The world's leaders had refused war for so long that their armies were thin and their fleets were old. Now the price was being paid in blood. At the center of the room, a woman with silver hair slammed her hand on the table. Chancellor Morgan, head of the United Earth Council, stared at the chaos with fierce eyes. "We cannot fight this war with scraps," she said. "It's time to release Project Hammerfall." The room fell silent. For years, Hammerfall had been only a rumor whispered by engineers and hidden officers, a weapon buried so deeply in secrecy that most believed it a myth. It had been built in the last days before Earth turned to peace, an answer to a war that never came. Now, with alien warships turning the skies into fire, the myth had become humanity's only hope. Project Hammerfall was never tested, one general said nervously. "It could destroy us as easily as them." "Better to die on our feet," Morgan replied coldly, "than wait here to be slaughtered." Orders were sent. Back in orbit, the Dauntless pulled away from a burning wreck. Her shields flared as another enemy beam grazed her hull. Metal buckled, but the ship still held. On the bridge, Captain Reyes wiped sweat from his brow. Every console around him was lit with warnings. His officers worked in silence, their faces pale with exhaustion. Then a new signal came through. Secure, high clearance. The Chancellor herself appeared on the main screen, her voice sharp as steel. "Captain Reyes," she said, "the time has come. We are activating Project Hammerfall. You will be the one to carry it." Reyes stiffened. He had heard the whispers, like every officer, but he had never believed them. "Hammerfall exists?" "It does," the Chancellor answered. "And if we fail now, humanity does not." The line cut. Coordinates appeared on their maps, leading far beyond Earth, deeper into enemy-controlled space. Reyes turned to his crew. Their faces showed both fear and fire. None of them had signed up to be legends, but war had chosen them. "Plot the course," he said. "We will deliver Hammerfall." Dauntless swung hard through the wreckage of the battlefield, pulling away from the heaviest fighting. Enemy ships turned to chase, but Earth's surviving frigates threw themselves in the way. One by one, they blocked the pursuit, buying the Dauntless time with their lives. Over open comms, their voices rang with courage. "Go, Dauntless. Carry the flame. We'll hold them." The bridge fell silent as their signals went dark, cut off by fire. Reyes closed his eyes for a breath, then spoke. "Their sacrifice will not be wasted." Hours later, in a hidden base carved into the rock of Earth's moon, the Dauntless docked. Massive armored doors opened, revealing what no human outside the council had ever seen. Inside was a weapon unlike any other, a spear of metal longer than the ship itself, its surface etched with strange glowing lines. It was not only human technology. Long ago, explorers had found fragments of alien machines buried on Mars, relics of a forgotten war. Hammerfall had been built from those fragments, powered by energy mankind barely understood. As the weapon was loaded onto the Dauntless, crew members stared in awe and dread. Some whispered prayers. Others touched the steel walls as if to draw courage from them. None could know if Hammerfall would save humanity or end it faster. When the loading was complete, Reyes gathered his officers. His voice was calm, but the weight of command pressed on every word. Hammerfall is our only chance. We will take it into the heart of the enemy fleet. We will strike where it matters most, and we will not return until it is done. The Dauntless launched once again, heavier than before, her engines blazing brighter. Behind her, Earth still burned. Ahead of her, the enemy armada closed ranks, their massive dreadnought shining like a mountain of fire. The crew braced for the journey. Pilots checked their fighters, engineers whispered to their engines, gunners loaded the last of the ammunition. Every soul aboard knew the truth. They were not flying into battle, they were flying into legend. And as the ship slipped into the shadows of space, the thought echoed in every heart. Humanity had refused war once, but now war had come. And with Hammerfall in their hands, they would show the galaxy that Earth was not prey. The Dauntless cut through the darkness, a lone battleship carrying the weight of an entire species, headed straight toward the shadow of the enemy. The mission had begun. The Dauntless slipped into the black, her engines dimmed to the lowest burn. The warship was massive, but she moved like a predator hiding in the shadows. Behind her, Earth was still burning, its skies scarred by falling fire. Ahead, the enemy fleet spread across the stars, their ships glowing like dark lanterns in the void. Somewhere within that swarm, intelligence reports said, was their command vessel, a dreadnought so large it dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. On the bridge, the crew worked in whispers, as if afraid the enemy might hear their voices through the vacuum. Every console glowed faintly red to protect their eyes in stealth mode. Captain Reyes stood at the center, his gaze fixed on the holographic map. The Dauntless and her small escort of frigates and corvettes moved carefully, weaving through asteroid fields and debris. Every shadow was their shield, every rock their cover. The silence was heavy. Crews across the ship felt the strain of it. They had faced battle already, but this was worse, waiting, hiding, holding their breath as they crept closer to the monster waiting in the dark. Then they saw it. At first it looked like another star, faint in the distance. But as they drew nearer, it grew larger and larger until the crew could no longer mistake it for anything else. The alien dreadnought hung in space like a floating continent. Its surface shimmered with rivers of light, strange patterns that pulsed as if the ship itself was alive. Towers rose from its hull, bristling with weapons. Around it, a cloud of smaller warships drifted like guards circling a throne. Gasps filled the bridge. Even the most hardened officers felt their hearts sink. The Dauntless was large, but compared to this, she was an insect before a mountain. It's the size of a city, one officer whispered. No, Reyes said softly. His eyes never left the giant ship. It's the size of a world. The dreadnought shifted slightly, and suddenly its weapons began to glow. A low hum filled the comms, a sound not made by human machines. Sensors screamed. The alien behemoth was charging something vast. A few minutes later, the weapon fired. A beam of light thicker than a skyscraper tore across space, striking Earth's moon. The entire crew of the Dauntless watched in horror as the surface of the moon split like shattered glass. Dust and fire exploded into the void, scattering into a ring of glowing debris. Waves of energy rolled outward, shaking every ship in the sector. On Earth, tidal waves struck coastlines. Cities trembled. Millions screamed as the sky lit up with the breaking of their oldest companion. Humanity had thought of the moon as eternal. Now it was wounded before their eyes. God help us, a young ensign whispered. Reyes's jaw tightened. This is why Hammerfall must succeed. We cannot let them fire that weapon at Earth. But stealth was no longer possible. Alien sensors swept the area, and a patrol of enemy cruisers broke formation, moving directly toward the Dauntless. Their weapons flared as they closed the gap. Evasive maneuvers, Reyes shouted. The Dauntless's engines roared back to full power. Her escorts opened fire, missiles streaking toward the oncoming ships. The quiet of stealth shattered into chaos. Railguns thundered, fighters launched, and the void filled with fire once again. An escort corvette took the first hit. The enemy beam sliced through it cleanly, breaking the small ship into two burning halves. Another frigate dodged left, releasing a swarm of drones that exploded against an alien cruiser, cracking its hull. The Dauntless dove through the middle of the fight, her broadside cannons spitting metal slugs faster than sound. One alien ship staggered and then erupted into a ball of fire, its fragments scattering into the asteroid field. But the enemy pressed harder. More ships joined the chase, forcing the Dauntless deeper into the rocks. Explosions lit up the asteroids, hurling debris in every direction. Gunners struggled to track targets in the chaos, firing at shadows and flashes of light. The battle became a brutal running fight, a desperate race to stay alive long enough to reach the dreadnought. Then came the betrayal. In the engineering section, alarms blared as systems failed one after another. Power drains surged across the ship, shutting down weapons for precious seconds. Engineers scrambled to find the cause and discovered sabotage. Someone had rerouted control codes, deliberately weakening the ship at the worst possible moment. A traitor. Security officers chased the suspect through the lower decks, gunfire echoing in the steel corridors. When they finally cornered him, the crew was stunned. It was Lieutenant Aras, a communications officer. His face twisted with hate as he shouted, "You don't understand. We cannot win. Humanity must kneel or we will all burn." Before they could capture him alive, he detonated an explosive, killing himself and tearing apart half the comms array. The bridge shook violently as systems failed. For a moment, Dauntless drifted helplessly under enemy fire. But the crew pulled together. Manual overrides, emergency power routes, desperate hands working faster than fear. Piece by piece, the ship came back to life. Her railguns roared again, smashing an alien ship to pieces. "Traitors or not," Reyes growled, his eyes blazing. "We finish this mission. Hammerfall will strike." The crew roared in answer. Their fear burned into fury. The Dauntless surged forward once more, battered but unbroken. Around her, wreckage floated, the remains of friends and enemies alike. Ahead, the dreadnought loomed closer, its monstrous frame filling every screen. The enemy weapon was charging again, its glow building like the birth of a star. Earth had only hours left. The Dauntless, scarred and bleeding, pushed on into the enemy's shadow. The most dangerous run of humanity's history had begun. The moon no longer shone the way it once did. Its bright, calm face, the companion that had watched over Earth for millions of years, was now broken. Vast scars stretched across its surface, glowing red with molten fire where the alien beam had struck. Chunks of rock drifted away from it, some as large as mountains, forming a deadly ring of debris that caught sunlight and glimmered like knives in the sky. On Earth, oceans heaved in chaos. Tides rose far higher than any human had ever seen. Coastal cities were swallowed by walls of water. Entire harbors disappeared under the waves. Bridges collapsed as rivers overflowed. Families fled higher ground, their faces pale with fear. They looked upward, seeing their oldest guardian torn open, and they understood. This war was not only in the heavens. It was crushing their world beneath their feet. The Dauntless had witnessed the strike from the edge of the asteroid belt. The crew had watched in silence as the moon was torn apart, their eyes wide with disbelief. Even the veterans who had seen battles before whispered in horror. The enemy's dreadnought had proven its power beyond all doubt. If that weapon fired again, it would not be the moon that suffered. It would be Earth itself. Captain Reyes stood on the bridge, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the alien giant that loomed ahead. His ship was battered, its hull scarred from the running fight through the asteroids. Smoke drifted from broken panels. Systems flickered in and out. And deep below deck, engineers worked frantically to repair the damage caused by the traitor's sabotage. A message arrived from Earth Command. The Chancellor's voice filled the bridge, heavy with grief. "Millions are dead," she said. "Cities drowned, entire nations shattered. We cannot endure another strike. Dauntless, you must deliver Hammerfall. It is all we have left." Reyes nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. He looked at his crew. Their faces were pale, but their eyes held fire. None of them thought of retreat. They knew they carried the last hope of humanity. "Prepare Hammerfall," Reyes ordered, "and keep us moving. No matter what happens, As we reached that dreadnought, the weapon was armed in the ship's lower decks where a team of engineers worked with shaking hands. Hammerfall pulsed with alien energy, a deep, unnatural light that filled the room. They strapped it into its cradle, linking it to the Dauntless's power core. Once launched, it would strike with the force of a dying star. But it could not be fired from afar. It needed to be delivered into the enemy's heart. The ship pressed forward, but the enemy knew they were coming. Waves of alien fighters poured from the dreadnought, swarming through the asteroid belt like locusts. The Dauntless launched her own squadrons to meet them. Dozens of tiny battles lit up the void, streaks of fire and explosions bursting across the rocks. Human pilots fought with desperation, outnumbered 3-1. For every alien fighter destroyed, 2 more replaced it. On the bridge, alarms rang as enemy fire slammed against the Dauntless's shields. The ship shook, sparks flying from consoles. One officer cried out as a panel burst into flame. Medics rushed to drag him clear. "We've lost 30% shield capacity," shouted the tactical officer. "Divert all auxiliary power," Reyes answered. His voice was iron. "We hold together or we die here." Below, engineers rerouted energy from non-essential systems. Lights dimmed across the ship, corridors plunging into shadow. Only the heartbeat hum of the reactors and the glow of Hammerfall remained constant. Then came the betrayal's final wound. As the crew fought to stabilize systems, they discovered corrupted navigation files buried deep in their computers. The traitor had left them behind, coordinates that, if followed, would lead the Dauntless directly into an ambush. For precious minutes, the ship had been moving toward a trap. Reyes slammed his fist against the console. "We have no time for ghosts," he growled. "Purge it all. Manual course corrections from here on." The officers obeyed, resetting controls, steering by raw instinct and sensor readings. Sweat dripped down their faces as they fought to keep the ship aligned toward its true target. Meanwhile, on Earth, the people did not know about Hammerfall or the Dauntless. All they saw were falling cities, burning skies, and the broken moon hanging above them like a wound that would never heal. In underground shelters, families huddled together, whispering prayers. Soldiers stood at broken barricades, rifles shaking in their hands. They could not fight the enemy in space, but they held their ground against panic and despair. One young girl in a flooded city clutched a shattered piece of stone that had fallen from the moon. She held it close, whispering to herself, "Don't give up. Someone will fight for us." And above her, far beyond the clouds, the Dauntless fought on. The dreadnought's weapon began to glow again, light building across its massive surface. Its towers pulsed brighter and brighter, the energy forming into a beam that promised to shatter the world below. Humanity had hours, perhaps less. On the Dauntless, Hammerfall was nearly ready. The crew strapped themselves in, knowing the next phase would either save their world or end it forever. Reyes stood tall, his hand gripping the railing as the ship pushed through the last line of enemy patrols. "Remember this," he told his crew, his voice carrying through the comms to every deck. "The world below us believes they are alone, but they are not. We are here, we are the shield, and we will not let Earth fall while we still draw breath." The Dauntless surged forward, half-crippled, scarred, and smoking, but still she moved, her prow aimed at the dreadnought, her engines burning with defiance. Earth trembled. The moon bled. The alien weapon charged, and humanity's last battleship carried the only hope left into the jaws of the storm. The Dauntless was bleeding. Her hull was torn with blackened scars. Her shields flickered weakly and whole decks lay in darkness. Yet she still flew. Every time the enemy thought her finished, her engines roared again, dragging her broken frame forward. She had become more than a ship. She was the last blade in humanity's hand, and she was aimed straight at the dreadnought. The alien colossus loomed ahead, its towers glowing brighter as it prepared to fire once more. The weapon that had scarred the moon now pulsed with enough power to crack Earth itself. The light it gave off was almost holy, but in its glow there was only death. On the bridge of the Dauntless, silence reigned. The crew stared at the dreadnought's vast hull, its surface like a continent wrapped in fire. No one spoke of odds anymore. They had all seen too much to believe in chances. There was only the mission: carry Hammerfall to the enemy's heart. "Status of the weapon?" Captain Reyes asked. "Charged and stable," the chief engineer replied, though his voice shook. "It will need manual detonation once it's inside their hull. Remote triggers won't hold against interference." The words struck the bridge like a hammer. Manual detonation. It meant someone would not return. A shadow passed across the faces of the crew, but no one looked away. They had already accepted death when they launched. Reyes stood tall. Then we'll do what must be done. The Dauntless plunged into the swarm. Alien fighters swirled like hornets, spitting fire. The battleship's railguns thundered, each shot tearing through the void. Human fighters, battered and few, soared ahead in desperate defense. One by one they were cut down, their last transmissions filled with defiance. Keep going, Dauntless. Don't stop. Inside the ship, corridors shook as enemy fire raked across the hull. Bulkheads burst. Smoke choked the air. Medics rushed through the chaos, dragging wounded to makeshift stations. The smell of blood and ozone filled every deck. Still hands worked. Gunners loaded shells. Engineers rewired systems with bare hands. Pilots launched the last of the fighters. Every soul aboard burned with one thought: get Hammerfall into the heart of the beast. The dreadnought grew larger, until it filled every screen. Its weapons unleashed storms of light, forcing the Dauntless to weave through fire that could have erased cities. The bridge shook violently. Shields failing, shouted the tactical officer. Hold course! Reyes roared. A beam grazed the ship, slicing away her starboard batteries. Entire sections of the hull erupted, spilling debris into space. Crewmen vanished in flashes of light. Yet the Dauntless did not turn aside. She roared forward, scarred but unstoppable. Finally, they reached it. The dreadnought's outer hull, a wall of alien metal stretching beyond sight. Automated guns rotated toward them, spitting streams of plasma. Dauntless's cannons answered, hammering open a wound. With a scream of tearing steel, the battleship forced her way into the wound, diving directly into the belly of the beast. Inside the dreadnought, space twisted. Towers of alien machinery rose around them, glowing with a strange pulse. The Dauntless fired at anything that moved, smashing through bulkheads and tearing open vast chambers. Sparks of alien fire lit the void like a storm inside a hollow world. We're inside, the helmsman gasped. Prepare Hammerfall, Reyes ordered. Down below, the weapon stirred. Its alien veins glowed brighter, a deep rhythm that felt almost alive. Engineers activated the final sequence. Warnings flashed across every console. No remote detonation possible. Manual override required. Reyes knew what it meant. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting those of his officers. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Commander Hale, his oldest friend, stepped forward. His voice was steady. I'll do it. Reyes shook his head. You're too valuable. We all are, Hale said softly. But someone must stay. Better me than you. Earth will need its captain alive. Reyes's jaw clenched. For a heartbeat, he wanted to argue, but he saw the fire in Hale's eyes, the calm of a man who had already chosen. Slowly, Reyes placed a hand on his shoulder. Then go with honor. Hale gave a tight smile, then turned and strode toward the weapon chamber. The crew parted for him silent. Some saluted. Others whispered his name. None tried to stop him. The Dauntless carved deeper into the dreadnought, dodging towers of fire and walls of alien steel. At last they reached the central core, a vast chamber glowing with rivers of energy. The dreadnought's heart. This is it, Reyes said. The ship turned, positioning Hammerfall for its final run. Engines screamed, pushing the battleship into the core. Enemy fire tore at her, ripping holes across her frame. But she did not falter. Hammerfall ready, the engineer reported. Detonate on my mark, Reyes commanded, though his throat felt like iron. In the weapon chamber, Commander Hale stood alone. He placed his hand on the activation key. His voice came across the comms, calm and strong. Tell them we did not kneel. Reyes closed his eyes. Mark, Hammerfall unleashed. The weapon detonated with a blinding light brighter than a sun. The Dauntless vanished in the blast, her steel body consumed in fire. The alien dreadnought shuddered as the energy tore through it, ripping its heart apart. Towers crumbled. Rivers of light exploded outward. The giant ship convulsed, its weapons silenced, before it finally split into 1,000 fragments. The shockwave blasted across the battlefield, tearing through the alien armada. Smaller ships were thrown into chaos, their formations breaking as the dreadnought burned. Those that survived fled into the void, their silence broken at last by fear. On Earth, the broken moon glowed with reflected fire. People looked to the skies, seeing the flash that lit up heaven. They did not know the names of those who fought. They did not know the cost. But they saw the enemy scatter, and for the first time since the war began, they believed survival was possible. The Dauntless was gone. Commander Hale was gone, but Hammerfall had struck, and the galaxy would never forget that humanity had answered fire with fire. The light of Hammerfall still burned across the heavens. For long moments, the blast was so bright that even those on Earth, thousands of miles below, had to shield their eyes. People poured from bunkers and shelters, staring upward in silence as the night sky lit with a second sun. The alien dreadnought, the ship that had split the moon and nearly broken the planet, was gone. All that remained was a storm of fire drifting through the void, but with the light came silence. No signals from the Dauntless, no voices on the comms. The great battleship that had carried humanity's last hope was gone, consumed in the blaze she had unleashed. On Earth, word spread quickly. First whispers in hidden command bunkers, then urgent transmissions across emergency networks. Finally, it reached the ears of the survivors in the streets. The enemy is retreating. The dreadnought is destroyed. The word spread like wildfire, and then across the broken cities of Earth, people began to cheer. In the flooded ruins of coastal towns, survivors raised their fists. In shelters beneath shattered skyscrapers, families embraced. Soldiers who had been ready to die at their barricades threw down their rifles and wept in relief. For the first time since the first salvo had lit the skies, humanity dared to hope. But hope came with grief. The Dauntless was gone, and with her, thousands of souls, men and women who had stood in the face of fire until their ship became a legend. Parents would never see their children again. Friends would never return. Commander Hale's sacrifice, one voice among many, was lost forever in the silence of space. Humanity had survived, but the cost was carved deep into every heart. In the halls of Earth's battered government, Chancellor Morgan addressed the world. Her face was tired, her hair streaked with ash from the capital's bombardment, but her voice carried with strength. The Dauntless has struck the heart of our enemy. They believed Earth weak. They believed us unwilling to fight. Tonight they know the truth. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity does not surrender. We are scarred, yes, but we still stand. And as long as we stand, this war is not over. The speech spread across what remained of the global network, played on cracked screens in shelters, echoed through radios powered by failing batteries. For billions, the words became a lifeline. Above, alien ships scattered. Without their dreadnought to anchor them, the fleet fell into disarray. Some fled into the void, their black hulls vanishing among the stars. Others drifted, their power broken by the shockwave. For the first time, the invaders looked less like gods and more like prey. Humanity had not won the war, but it had survived the first storm. In the days that followed, wreckage rained across the system. Shards of the dreadnought burned through the atmosphere, falling as streaks of fire across the skies. Children pointed upward, calling them dauntless stars. Some of those fragments crashed into oceans or deserts, leaving craters that smoked for weeks. Scientists studied the alien remains with awe and fear. The technology inside the wreckage was beyond human understanding, yet now it belonged to Earth. Memorials rose quickly. In every surviving city, people built monuments to the lost. Statues of steel, carved from the wreckage of defense stations, names etched into walls, candles left in long rows. The name of the Dauntless was whispered in every language, a symbol of courage. And the crew, most of whose names would never be known, were remembered as the first heroes of the new age. But grief was not the only force stirring. Across the world, industries began to turn. Old shipyards that had been silent for generations came alive again. Factories retooled, building weapons instead of comforts. Engineers tore open the fragments of alien technology, racing to adapt what they found. For the first time in a century, Earth was preparing not for peace but for war. Soldiers trained in fields once empty. Pilots took to the skies and hastily repaired fighters. Officers studied new tactics drawn from the Dauntless's sacrifice. The world had seen what waited among the stars, and it understood. Survival meant strength. Yet among all this, one truth echoed in every heart. The enemy would return. The destruction of their dreadnought was not the end. It was only a warning to them, proof that humans were not as weak as they had believed. Somewhere beyond the stars, another armada was gathering. In the ruins of the lunar surface, search teams uncovered fragments of the Dauntless herself, twisted steel, shattered hull plating. Among the debris, they found the ship's battered nameplate, scorched but still legible, Dauntless. It was brought back to Earth, placed in the heart of the capital, where millions came to see it. Some touched it with reverence. Others wept at its sight. All felt the same fire, the belief that humanity could rise again. At night, when survivors looked up at the wounded moon, they no longer saw only despair. They saw a scar that proved humanity had stood against the impossible and struck back. The war was far from over. The enemy had not spoken, had not explained, had not asked. They had come with fire, and they would come again. But Earth was no longer the world that had refused war. It had awoken. It had bled. It had endured. And in the silence after the battle, the galaxy itself seemed to whisper a truth it could never ignore. Humans fight back.